All right, so let me ask you a quick question. How long do you wait for things? Like how long, if somebody promises you something, how long do you wait?
A couple minutes.
Yeah.
Depends on what it is.
Couple minutes, like if it's really good, maybe a couple of years. If it's something extremely good, maybe like college graduation, which some people are doing here soon, right? You know, maybe 4 years. You probably did it in like 2.5, but the rest of us did it in 5 or more. Right? Oh, just me? Okay. So how long do you wait for something? Like how long? If somebody promises you something,
I think it depends on what you're waiting on. Are you waiting on a human to do something for you, or are you waiting on something that's supposed to come for you?
so what I hear in your response is if it's God, you're willing to wait a little bit longer than a person?
I'm not willing to wait long on my children to obey.
Yeah, I don't blame you for that. And I want to clarify, like, I mean, if they promised you something, that would be different than if their job is to obey right now, right? Would you agree, Abby? She's like, this is dicey, you're sitting in between both of you.
You two made promises as a kid.
Yeah, I think, you know, if you're waiting on a person, like, one of the things that I loved about George back in the day when he was driving is he was always early. I think Jack gets it from him. He was always early. Anything. If you were on time, you were late. Kind of that idea. And so he'd be waiting on Cheryl, his wife, and he would go get in his truck and he would honk the horn if she wasn't out there with him ready to go. Come on, let's go. And she would have to rush around to go out there, right? She probably doesn't appreciate that story as much as I do. But if you're waiting on a person, it's one thing. If you're waiting on like a promise from God, absolutely, that's another thing. But are you willing to wait 10 years for a promise to come true from God? 10 years is a long time, isn't it? It's a long time, but that's exactly what Abraham's doing, okay? As we kind of continue our discussion of Abraham, the story of Abraham, he's been waiting a long time. God made some promises to him. He said, follow me, I'm going to bless your stocks so that you can be a blessing to others. I'm going to give you all of this land. I'm going to create your family line, be an entire nation. And Abraham's faithful, and he follows God out of his hometown. His parents are left behind, everything that he knew, and he goes with God, but 10 years. Like, come on, God. At some point, Abraham starts to ask, what's going on here? And today we're going to see this in a strong way. And there's, you know, the next couple of chapters as we go through, we're going to see like this tug and pull of, God, you promised me these things. They're not coming true. It's been 10 years. What now? What now? And God reassures Abram in ways that are still with us today, in ways that should encourage us when we feel like we're waiting a long time for something, in ways that we can know that God is truly with us in this life, in ways that we can understand what our faith really means. And so today I love the title, it's Saving Faith in a Sticky God, because we're going to see today what God says about faith and what it does, and we're going to see today how God sticks with us. Are you ready? All right, Genesis chapter, I always forget because again, I'm kind of in a lot of different chapters as we move through this. Genesis chapter 15. We're going to take a look at all of chapter 15. So I'm going to talk really fast today, but there's some really key, important things in there. I think does chapter 15 go 1 through 21? It's got the verses in there. It ends with 21?
Yep.
Good. Okay, then we're going to cover the whole thing. You ready?
Yep.
Fasten your seatbelts, ladies and gentlemen. Keep your hands and arms inside the ride at all times. After this, the word of the Lord came to Abraham in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abraham. I am your shield, your very great reward. Why would Abraham be afraid at this point? Why does God have to show up here and say, do not be afraid? I am your shield, your very great reward. I wondered the same thing. And here's what I learned. Remember, we just finished how Abraham went and rescued Lot from all of those kings from the north, conquered them. Kings from the north were upset because the kingdoms that they ruled over, like Sodom and Gomorrah and some of those other southern kingdoms, were rebelling. And so the kings came down and they straightened them out and they took everything from them back up to the north. And then Abram's like, oh no, you don't. You can't take my nephew. And he goes and he rescues Lot. And he brings everything back. So at this point, that was the first war that we have on record, right? And Abram's back in his hometown going, I wonder if those kings are going to retaliate. I wonder if they're going to, muster some more forces and some more allies and come in and defeat me because I just stole everything back from them and made them look like chumps, right? That's why God said, don't be afraid. You know what's interesting? Over and over, listen to this very carefully, because life is full of fear. It's full of it. I'll bet you the majority of the times you find yourself upset, anxious, or panicked, you can trace it back to a root fear. I'm not loved, I'm not valued, I don't have enough. All of those things, those are based in fear. And God starts this message here and continues it all throughout the scriptures. And what is that message? Do not be afraid. It's the first time he says it, but it won't be the last. Because over and over and over again, throughout humanity, we see him saying, have no fear, be bold and courageous. Do not be afraid, I am with you. The whole purpose and point of God's rescue mission on earth and calling Abram out is to say, I am your God, you are my people, I am pledging myself to you. Whole purpose of it, because he loves us. He says, do not be afraid. I am your shield. I love this word. More and more this week I've seen this word come true in my life because when you feel alone, knowing that God is the very first thing that anything's encountered in life, as you're moving forward in life, anything that comes towards you, God is the first thing. That's what shields do. And they block and defend. And knowing that God is with me and he's my shield. He's my forward guard, and oh, by the way, he's my rear guard too, and he hems me in behind and before, right? Knowing that makes me more confident in my ability to handle whatever's life thrown at. It doesn't mean that I'm always confident, okay? But it means that I can be reminded that God is my shield, is my shield, is my shield. Read Psalms and you'll see how many times they use the word shield for God. Your very great reward. Are all of your translations deciphered that way? Your very great reward?
Mine says your reward will be great.
Your reward will be great. Yeah. That's actually more in line with the Greek structure of this, or the Hebrew structure of this passage. Your reward will be great. Regardless, what's the reward? What?
It's great.
Yes, and what is it?
It's God.
It's God. Yeah, I'm your shield. Do not be afraid. I am with you. I am your reward. It will be great, and you will be blessed. And Abraham knows he's going to be blessed. But the simple fact is, Abraham was blessed, and he died with very little to his name. But yet God said he was blessed. And through him, he blesses the entire earth. Okay? I told you we were going to go through this quickly. It doesn't feel like it right now, does it? No. Uh-oh. All right, let's keep going. Abraham says, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless? And the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus. Sovereign Lord, what can you give me? He says, do not be afraid, Abraham. I am your shield, and your reward will be great. And what is Abraham asking for? More reward? What's he asking for? I mean, I'm not asking you hard questions right now. It's right there on
A son.
Yes. He's asking for a child. He said, you promised. I don't care how much money I have. See, this is one of the issues that we're going to see today and next week that really creates some tension between Abram and God. Like, it's not that Abraham doubts that he's going to inherit the land or that he's going to be rich and famous. It's not that he doubts any of that stuff. What he's asking God for is not more of those things. He's asking God for one thing. An heir. That's it. And next week we're going to see Sarah is kind of asking the same thing and takes matters into her own hand. Says, I'd like a kid. And since you haven't provided one, by the way, he was what, 75 years old when he was called out of Ur in the very beginning? So this is 10 years later, he's 85 years old. Like, at what point, God, are you going to allow us to bear children here? Because I think our time has passed. And you said, so I'm left to my own devices. I'm left to try to figure it out. Maybe my servant Eliezer of Damascus, he's a servant in Abram's household. And because of that, Abram can adopt him as an heir, to inherit everything and to give everything to him, to carry on Abram's name. And Abram's like, well, maybe that's how you plan on doing it, God. You didn't say necessarily it would be my offspring, you just said offspring. So maybe your plan here is for me to adopt somebody into it. Next verse. Abram says, you've given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. And God says, no, dude, you still don't get it. You still don't get it. The word of the Lord came to him and says, this man, he doesn't even name him. He doesn't even say Eliezer like Abram did. He said, no, this man will not be your heir, but as a son of your own flesh and blood will be your heir. Okay, you're 85 years old, and God's like, no, you're going to have a kid. You got to be going, okay, seriously, God? Like, really? God says, Abram, I promise you, you're going to have a kid. Come outside with me. Let's go look. And he takes him out and he shows him all of the heavens and all of the stars that are up there. And he says to him, he took him outside and says, look up at the sky, count the stars. If indeed have you ever tried to count stars? And he says to him, so shall your offspring be. And Abram has this choice to make after all of this time of waiting. Does he believe God? Does he trust that God's going to be true to his word? Verse 6. So what does Abram do? Believes God. Yeah, okay, God. He believes God. The fact that God didn't use Eliezer's name is a legal thing. Had he used his name, he would have validated Abram's thought of this could be my heir. Again, when you get into these legal things, like it matters what you say and who you name. And God doesn't even want to go close to that. So he doesn't even use Eliezer's name. He says, no, Abram, you're going to have a son. And your offspring is going to outnumber the stars. And Abram believed the Lord. And he credited to him as righteousness. What does it mean to believe? Have faith, yeah. Absolutely. To put your confidence in something, right? Knowing that it's going to stand up to what you guys all believed, that those chairs that you're sitting in were going to hold you. That's a pretty easy way. You can test it and be like, I wonder, and put a little bit of pressure and a little bit more and a little bit more. Now, if you try to sit on those benches out there around the back of the patio, I would suggest doing it that way. Just because, I don't know. But when it came to God's promise, Abram put his confidence. This is a weight-bearing word. It means that you can lean your entire weight on this and trust that it's going to hold you up. That's what believe means. You put your entire weight on it. It's not going to let you down. First time this word is used in the Bible. The Lord believed him and he credited it to him as righteousness. Ever been credited something? Credits are a whole lot better than charges, right? We're going to come back to this in a minute. Verse 7, he also said to him, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur, of the Chaldeans, to give you this land to take possessions of. But Abraham said, Sovereign Lord, how can I know that I will gain possession? God, how do I know I'm going to have a child? Well, believe me, Abram, I'm going to show you the stars, your offspring, I'm going to outnumber them. And Abraham believes. But then we come back to this, and all of this land I'm going to give you. And Abram's like, how do I know? You ever found yourself in that place? Like, how do I know? How do I know? How can I know that I'll gain possession of it? And God says, bring me a heifer, a goat, and a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a pigeon. And Abraham brought these things to him, and he cut them in two, and he arranged the halves opposite of each other. The birds, however, he did not cut in half, because they're kind of small, that'd be hard to eat. What's going on here? Anybody?
It's a covenant of some sort, yes.
The covenant of some sort, yes. God is saying, Abram, you want to know? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to cut a covenant. The reason that the old days it was called cutting a covenant was because they would take animals and cut them in half. And then they would separate them, and then the parties agreeing to the covenant would walk between. I'm kind of going ahead of myself here. I was going to save this for later, but I'll fill you in. They would walk between the animal halves. Gross. But all strong covenants, the strongest ones are created out of blood. And secondly, by walking through between the animals, what you were saying is, if I don't keep my end of the bargain, I deserve the same fate as the animals. Man, that's a covenant right there, right? Like Luke and I agree on something, we cut a couple of animals in half, separate them, we walk through, and then Luke says to me, and I say to him, if I don't keep my end, you can do this to me, and he says the same thing about him, and then we got our samurai swords at home just to keep each other squared up, right?
That's cool.
It is cool. All right, so he didn't cut the little birds in half, but then the birds of prey came down in carcasses, and Abram drove them away. Let me just very quickly, because I don't want to spend a lot of time here, very quickly, what God's going to do is he's going to reveal some future to Abram. The birds of prey are symbolic. They try to mess with the covenant that God and Abram are creating here right now. And so Abram's got to chase off all these pesky distractions and things that are creating problems. The next few verses say, go ahead and forward that. As the sun was setting, Abraham fell into a deep sleep, and a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. The reason that that's there is because this is a very somber moment. You're going to see why in a minute, okay? But this is to just show Abram how serious what's about to happen is, and it's good. Then the Lord said to him, know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be stranger in a country not their own, and they'll be enslaved and mistreated there. Any ideas on what that is? Yeah, the Egyptian captivity, absolutely. God provides for them in Egypt for a while. That was their refuge when famine came. And then they grow into a mighty nation, and they're persecuted, and then they're finally released. And look, I'll punish the nation that they served as slaves. And afterwards, they'll come out with great possession, because Pharaoh's like, get out of here and take as much as you want. Just go, right? Changes his mind afterwards and chases them down. But he doesn't win. And that's what God's telling Abram. Like, your future generations, this is stuff that's going to happen. Next verse. You, however, will go to your ancestors in peace and be buried at a good old age. I mean, he's already 85. He's already good old age. And in the fourth generation, your descendants will come back here, for the sins of the Amorites have not yet reached its full measure. There's interesting stuff you can get into if you look at what this statement means, but just know this. God is patient with us. God is patient with us. He's long-suffering, waiting for us. If we find ourselves that in the midst of sin and waywardness and not following God, like he waits and waits and waits, longing for us to come back to him on our own accord. That is a good God. The Amorites eventually get destroyed because they don't ever come back, but he waits and waits and waits until it's at its full measure. Okay? 17, when the sun had set and darkness had fallen, a smoking firepot with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces. What do you think that represents, the smoking firepot and blazing torch? God, absolutely. His holiness, his righteousness represented. Remember, later on, he's going to lead the Israelites out of Egypt as a pillar of cloud and a flame at night, right? So all of that is to represent the holiness of this incredible God. And he passes between the pieces. Next verse. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham and said, to your descendants. This is what he's saying by walking through the halves. saying, to your descendants, I'm going to give all of this territory. From the Wadi of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Kadamites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and Jebusites. It's a lot of sites. It says, Abram, all of this is going to be yours. All of this is going to be yours. Is that the end of the chapter? Good, I guess we're done here. Makes perfect sense, right? I told you there were two things that I wanted us to walk away from here, because what you see is Abram starting out this chapter going, but God, you said it hasn't happened yet. But God, how can I know? Like the two big questions that he's asking God is you said that this promise was going to come true. It's 10 years later at this point. It still hasn't come true. I think maybe you're going to do it this way. And God says, no, I'm not going to do it that way. You're going to have your own son. I promise you. Come out here and look at the stars. And God says, I want you to know that I am a saving God and I am here for you. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And Abram says, he believed. And was credited to him as righteousness. And secondly, he's like, God, how can I be sure that you're going to do these things? And God's like, well, cut these animals in half. Let's talk about it. See, what Abraham was encouraged by were these two things, that he could realize that he had a saving faith and that God was a sticky God. Those of you with young kids know, when you get in your car, after the kids have been in there for a little while, especially the back seat where they stay, you don't feel clean when you get out. There's just no way to do it. Like, you know, if they've got their own bathroom and you go in there to wash your hands, after you've washed your hands and turned off the faucet, you're like, I feel it just as dirty as when I washed it, right? Like, it's sticky, it sticks to you, it doesn't leave you. Kids especially are really good at that. It's just hand them a sucker and see what happens, right? And so when I think about this, like I want you to see that God is saying, I am pledged to you to such a way you will never get me off of you. You'll never get away from me. And sometimes we feel like it's pretty easy to walk away, but here's what I want you to see, that God is a sticky God. He's sticking to you. You can wander all you want, but God is right there with you because he loves you. How do I know this? Well, let's start at the first one. Saving faith. How do we know that we have a saving faith? Because this statement is replicated and duplicated and resounded throughout the New Testament after Jesus came and died on the cross for our sins and was buried and rose again on the third day. Even Paul and Peter and James and the writer of Hebrews talks a lot about what faith is. And what salvation is, and where salvation comes from. And I told you that this word was the very first time that we saw it. It came from Genesis, not from Paul. Not even from Jesus. Like, this is from God himself. Abram believed God. He put his full weight, his full confidence in God. And then what happened? Then he worked really hard to be a good person. Credited to him as righteousness. How many of you have taken accounting at any point in time in your lives? How many of you enjoy accounting? I've taken accounting twice. Because the first time I did not do as well as I needed to do. So I had to take it again. I do not like accounting. I don't like numbers in general, okay? One of the things that I learned about in accounting was credits and debits. Right? Credits and debits. And you try to keep, there's a little chart that you got to use, and if you take credits here, you got to show debits. It's just weird. Stop. You know, it's just too confusing to me. But the word credit means to put into an account. To put into an account. So oftentimes we'll see this word credited used in a variety of ways when we get into faith conversations. Sometimes it's reckoned to them as righteousness. What does it mean to reckon something? I reckon we'll be all right today. It's an older word, I think. I don't know. But it means to kind of come to an agreement, right? And then in biblical terms, or when you start to get really smart about biblical stuff, then they start to use really fancy words. And the fancy words for this is imputed. Anybody know what imputed means? Poured into, like yes, just just, I imagine a big funnel and, you know, and God's pouring and it's filling, right? Same thing. Because Abraham believed God's word to him. His life was credited with what? Righteousness. Does that mean that Abraham was a righteous person?
To be credited as such.
He's been credited as such, yes. But he's a man. And as long as we live in these bodies, guys, as long as we live in these bodies, we aren't righteous. We've been credited with righteousness. So in that accounting idea, this account that we have, that we try to live up to God's word, we love him, we don't want to let him down. Like listen to me, if you're trying to do bad things against God, like, that's just dumb. And yet I still do it. But as I'm trying to live a life for Jesus, and I find myself falling and being tempted and failing, and making mistakes and knowing that this week, you know, and all of this stress, I did not handle myself as well as I wish that I would have. You know, you go, man, I'm not a righteous person. No, I'm not. But glory be to God, he looks at my account and he sees all of those times that I failed and he says, don't. I'm going to credit righteousness all over that account. Righteousness, righteousness, righteousness. Not because I've earned it, but because God has graciously applied it to me. Do you see what he's doing there? Graciously applied it to me. Abraham was not perfect and will not be perfect the rest of his life. But God says, because you believed in me, because you believe that my promises are true, because you believe I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do, and I'm going to pour righteousness into your account and into your life. You don't even know. You don't even know. Saving faith is just this, guys. Believe in God. Believe in God. Believe that God can make you righteous. Believe that he alone can do it. And it's got nothing to do with you. How do I know it's got nothing to do with you? Let's look at the sticky God. We talked about this, cutting covenant, okay? In the ancient world, animals were sacrificed, cut in two halves. They were separated, and a pathway was created between the animals. The parties entering the contract covenant would walk the path between the animals to ratify the agreement. By doing so, they accepted the obligations to carry. Reading really fast. You keeping up? Carry out their parts of the covenant. As they failed to keep their parties were saying, they deserve the same fate as the animals.
That was a 3-year-old.
3-year-old heifer, ram,
Is that
and...
foreshadowing for something else?
No idea. Good question.
They didn't come in, but yeah, 3 years, this happened.
I don't know. Maybe it was representative. I don't know. It sounded like this was kind of the normal agreement, like bring these animals and we do it.
I think it was because it was full grown but not old or damaged and such. Like it was full size, but it's still in good condition.
That full value.
Right, yes, yeah, full value.
You guys, sure. I don't know. I'll trust you. Believe it. Sounds good to me. Here's what I want you to see. The covenant was cut the animals in half, separate them. And then the parties agreeing to the obligations that they were responsible to would walk between the animals. Who walked between the animals? What was Abram doing? What was Abram doing? Thank you! Sleeping! He's sleeping, guys! Dude, this is huge. Gives me goosebumps. Because this is what it's all about. Abraham was not able to walk the path. He was asleep. He never took on any obligation here. Guys, listen to this. He never agreed to the terms. He never said, I'll do my part, God, you do yours. No, God said, I'll do both parts. Abram never walked the path. He was asleep. He couldn't add anything to the covenant. He couldn't take anything away from the covenant. He was out like a teenage girl on Saturday morning. Sleeping.
Some girls are sleeping.
Okay, you're right. I'll give you credit. Teenager. I had a teenage son and he was worse than the girls. It's 2 in the afternoon, Jack, get up. Okay. Guys, why? If it's a covenant that two parties have to agree on, why would God say, go to sleep, Abram, I got this? Because he knew. He knew Abram would never be able to meet that end of the covenant. He knew. And yet this is the man that he said, your faith will be credited to you as righteousness. You'll be blessed so that you can be a blessing to other people, like the entire world. You're going to walk into this land. Abram's like, God, how can I know? Let me show you, Abram. How do you want to know this? Like, this covenant is life and death, guys. God is saying, do to me as these animals are if I don't keep the covenant. By the way, Abram, I got this. I'll covenant to both ends of this. I'll covenant to your side of this, Abram, and I'll covenant to God's side of this. You don't have to worry about a thing. I got it. I got it. I got it. And just because there's really good stuff in here, I want to make sure that I'm telling you everything. How dependent was the covenant on Abram? All right. The beautiful thing about this covenant is that God says, when you have faith in me, you are a son of Abram. So the same promises that he's making to Abram are the same promises that we can take on ourselves. And here's what I want you to see. By God walking this pathway in our place, we get the same results. The same. That God has done this, guys. God has done this. We are justified by faith, but not by works, because God himself went through the covenant. And guess what happened when he said, it's time to pay for the account? How was the covenant resolved? I mean, he might not have been cut in half, but Jesus was scourged and beaten, short of death. He was forced to carry his own cross. They nailed him to it, hung him up in the air on the cross. I mean, if that doesn't sound like payment for breaking the covenant, I don't know what else does. The Romans were very purposeful about trying to find the most torturous way to kill people. Cutting in half might have been too easy. Jesus said, I am the payment for humans breaking this covenant. God knew it from the very beginning. Knew it from the very beginning. This one divine covenant, God promised that he was forming a people, that's you and me, which would be part of his kingdom. That's the land that he promised Abraham. By salvation, which is the blessing. And Jesus is at the core of the threefold promise. You want encouragement, folks, like, have faith. Because it's credited to you as righteousness that God did this and is doing this and has done this and loves you enough to have done it from the very beginning. And secondly, see that he is a sticky God. But do you see that no matter what you do at this point, because you didn't walk between the cut animals, you did not say, I'm going to covenant with you, God. If you do this, then no, you were asleep, represented by Abraham. That God will never leave you or forsake you. That God will never leave you alone. That God will never stop loving you, because he can't. Because he said, I take both parts of the covenant on myself as responsibility for it. And then he satisfies when we fail over and over and over again. Okay, let's wrap this up. I came across this because sometimes it's hard to take these Old Testament concepts and covenants and apply them to ourselves today, but the Gospel Project did a really good job in this, and I cut and copied, okay? I also give them credit, because I didn't come up with this Gospel Project. Like, great place if you guys are interested in learning more. They have a lot of good information, but here's what I want you to see as we close out today, okay? God never wavers in his pledge to us. He can't. Because this covenant was all encompassing and everlasting. He can't walk away from you. We can stop being faithful to him, but his word says he will never stop being faithful to us. Who then are the heirs of the precious and very great promises made to Abram and Abraham, same person, and to his seed? Say it with me. I am. I am. I am. To whom can it be said, your sins are forgiven? God is for you. With all his power, his goodness, and his mercy, and he will pursue you all of your life. And you will rise from the dead. Your name will be great. Your assembly as the stars of the heavens. Your name will be great. Your assembly of people with you. As the stars of the heavens. And you will possess the gates of your enemies in the land of Israel. All of the earth will be your inheritance. You will fill the new world with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord. You are those people because of your faith in God. To whom can all this be said to you? Because you're a child of Abraham through faith in Christ. You are blessed because God said to Abraham, you will be a blessing. He will bless you. We have saving faith, and we have a sticky God. When we recognize these two things, and maybe you haven't had an opportunity to really think about this, like if you've never decided to put your faith, your belief in God, there's no better time than now. Because when you do, then you are part of the same family of Abraham. The same promises here apply to you. Like you get to live in a blessed state every day. That doesn't mean that the cash machines are going to churn out all of the money and set it into your bank account. That means that you are a child of the Most High God. And he becomes your shield. And he is pledging himself to you. And that your penalty for not living up to God's covenant has been paid. If you haven't done that, first put your faith in him. Like that's the first thing you've got to do. I'd love to see your name in verse 6 instead of Abram's. And Luke believed God and it was credited to him as righteousness, right? Put your name there to God. Believe. Help me in my unbelief. But I believe and you are good. And if you've never done that, man, start there, because the biggest encouragement that we all need when we're facing things that don't seem to go our way is knowing that God is with us and has saved us. And that we can stand before him without blemish or fault because of his righteousness being credited to our account. Secondly, I want you to see, man, he is on your side. You can't break covenant with him because he walked both parts of that. You don't have to. He is sticking to you because the covenant cost him dearly. And he says, you're worth it. You're worth it. So no matter what kind of encouragement you need today, no. You have saving faith. Nothing can stand against. And you have a sticky God. As the worship team comes back up and we close out, remember the communion's in the back. I'd love for you to take some time thanking him for what he did to fulfill that covenant so that we can have a relationship with him. His blood was poured out so that our righteousness can be poured into our account. His righteousness can be poured into our account. So the communion's back there. The the family Bibles back there. If something here stuck out to you, reminded you about something, you came across a great verse this week that you're like, oh, I want to share this and write it down so that people that follow me on this planet know that Bible's over there. We've got the prayer wall up there. The private prayers are put below the blue stripe. The public ones that are prayed over our prayer meeting go above it. There's a piece of paper back there, and of course we've always got the giving box. So worship by giving back. I want you to process all of this, and I want you to ask yourself two things. One, do I believe? Do I believe? I want you to praise God that you can be called righteous in His sight because of that faith, credited to you as righteousness. Secondly, I want you to spend a little bit of time going, okay, God, what am I trying to do to earn your blessing, your grace, relationship with you? What am I trying to do to earn it? Because clearly there is no way you can do it. He's done it. You might as well be sleeping. I want you to trust Him. Rely on Him. And spend a little bit of time thinking about, God, in what ways do I not know that you are with me on this path, that you've walked it, that you're walking with me, that you've created a way for us to have this relationship, and that you have pledged yourself to me in such a way I will never shake you. Think about that for a little bit. Let's pray, Lord.